Hi, everybody. Welcome. So nice to have you with us. I'm Dr. Z, and I'm joined here by Michelle Pitot, and we have been having some conversations about metabolic health, and just thought that we would continue that conversation, share a bit of it with you. So, Michelle, really nice to be able to talk with you today.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So it was exciting when you reached out and find we're in the same area and we share some interests in health.
Yeah.
And so as we think about bringing health to people in all of our work, especially metabolic health, I was very encouraged by that. So tell the audience your perspective. Where are you coming to this health discussion from?
Okay. Well, originally, I'm trained as a licensed clinical social worker, so I'm a psychotherapist. And for years, that's what I practiced, is working with talk therapy and learning different approaches to therapy and dealing with trauma and helping folks get emotionally healthy and well. And I started feeling a little bit like we were missing some pieces of that with regards to, I started learning somatic approaches to healing emotionally, and that includes understanding how trauma is stored in the body. Mm-hmm. And then that led me to a lot more reading about the body-mind connection. And that led me to the work of Doctors Christopher Palmer and Georgia Ede, mm-hmm. who are both Harvard-trained psychiatrists who have both written books about what they call metabolic psychiatry. Mm-hmm. And when I started learning about metabolic psychiatry, it changed. It was just a game changer for me in my work.
Awesome.
Yeah, really exciting.
What has that looked like? Have you brought that into your relationships with patients, and how has that been?
Absolutely. It started out for me working with just addressing the connection, what we're finding out about if our brain is not fueled well, mm-hmm. then we are going to struggle with our emotions. And so really starting strictly from an emotional standpoint, learning how do we fuel our brain? And if we're not giving it enough good energy, Dr. Palmer's book is called Good Energy. Mm-hmm. If we're not giving it, it's called brain energy. Yeah. Sorry. It's called brain energy. So if we're not giving the brain energy that it needs, we're going to struggle with our emotions, because it's not the first thing the brain is working is to keep us alive. And our emotions are going to be all over if we're not fueling the brain enough. So I really started from that point of view and learning the nutritional connection, mm-hmm. about how we really have emphasized in the standard American diet, carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates, have been too strongly emphasized as where we need to get our energy from, when truly we need to be more protein and fat forward.
I imagine most people have the experience of getting some, sugar rush, have a soda, a lot of sugar, get really amped up.
Yeah.
And, certainly it can feed into a space that is very similar to anxiety. And then, I know I've experienced, and then you kind of crash as the blood sugar's dropping and the insulin is surging. But right. it sounds like even apart from this short-term thing, there's like a deeper layer to this process that we've kind of been missing. It isn't just a few hours around a sugary treat necessarily.
Exactly. And I thought I was learning new research. This is what's exciting to me, is that actually some of the original research is over 100 years old, when people were looking into epilepsy and treating epilepsy with nutritional approaches. Before we had drugs to treat epileptic seizures, people were looking at nutritional approaches and finding success with a ketogenic way of eating. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that research was set aside when the drugs came along to manage the seizures. So it's really revisiting old research about the brain and how it works. And just like what you just said, it's the short-term piece of energy is one thing, but it's more long-term, repetitive, when we're focusing on the sugar and then the crash, and the energy and then the crash. That's what puts our brain into a longer-term deficit of being able to function well, which can lead to a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, and it can stay in one or the other if we're not taking care of what the brain needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very encouraging to hear you talk through that and just think about, one of the most frustrating things for me, so just to let viewers know if you're not familiar, so I'm a classically trained internist, internal medicine physician, and I worked as a primary care doctor for quite a few years. I was right on the front lines trying to help everybody, both physical health, mental health, and it's no surprise to anybody. We're here in the middle of a very difficult situation with both of these things, with rates of chronic disease of all types are of course, skyrocketing and costs associated with that. And then, the most important thing, I think, our well-being is so much wrapped into these things. And so to find anything that can help move the needle on any of these things, of course, is great. But then when you can tie the two together in a way that helps us to physically be healthier and helps our mental space to be better, like what you were saying, this mind-body connection, this is where I have really tried to dive deep, is just that it's the same thing, really. And we can have a conversation where we try to separate these things for some purposes, but really we're trying to create a holistic way of taking care of someone, taking care of ourselves, and just a way of being in the world that is, more thoughtful and aligned with the way the body is designed to operate.
Yeah, exactly. And it is very exciting. And in my work as a psychotherapist, it's not one or the other. Trauma is something that we need to process through. We need to address it. We need to look at what we've gone through in our lives, and we need to be able to talk that through and piece it together and make sense of it so that we can understand it better. The frustrating thing for me is if we're not dealing with the body, and if we're not making sure that we are taking care of the nutritional needs that our whole body has, so many of our hormones, which also influence our emotions, they're thrown off. And so serotonin, which the body needs, it's one of our feel-good hormones, right?
Yeah.
Is produced in the gut. 90% of the serotonin we have, I'm sure you know this, is produced in the gut, not in the brain. So we're dealing with the brain, sure, but if we're not making sure that the gut is able to take in nutrients well, then the production of the serotonin is impacted. So we can't separate out the two. We have to talk through our traumas, and we need to make sure we're nourishing our body in a way that we can handle the healing, and that we can make sure that we're able to heal, really.
Yeah, I love just kind of the both and of it. It's hard for any of us to hold multiple things at once. We want to find the one thing that is going to solve everything, and we kind of go with it. And I think the medical system these days, as far as metabolic health, it's so focused just on a medication. And I try not to disparage anything on medication. Has its place and good purposes. But, so often we have this medication first viewpoint or priority where it's like, well, we have a pill now. And it's like the fundamentals don't matter anymore.
Right.
And I think really the way we need to try to approach these things is like, medication is something that you should add on top of this entire other foundation that we are doing of health, which is like probably, and I've said this a lot, like trauma is probably at the very base of so many of these things in some fashion. And so doing the deep work to get into that space is just so important. And then layering everything else on top of it, the healthy food choices, especially on top of it, because it all cycles and flows together.
Exactly. What's really interesting about the cycle and the flow that you mentioned is that I have found that when I'm working with people, because now I work with people both for mental health reasons and then also for health, just metabolic health.
Yeah.
And I'm a health coach as well. So what I have found is I can address it from different perspectives. And so sometimes when people are coming to see me for health concerns, they're having low energy, their sleep is off, they can't lose weight, or they keep gaining weight, all various health concerns. They have brain fog, all these different things. when I work with them around a nutritional and other levers for metabolic health, frequently as they start getting cleaner with making sure that they're getting the nutrients they need, cleaner with their food is how we talk about it, right? How do you get clean with your food? As they're starting to do that, often their old traumas will start to surface. So then they have to do that definitely need to do the healing work, or they may go back to continuing to use the food. Because, I mean, let's face it, food can take an edge off.
Yeah.
And so,
I have often described food as like a type of drug or a type of medication, you know?
Right.
It has certain pros and cons to it, effects and what we would call side effects. But it can certainly be effective, you know, especially in the short term. And sometimes it's even just the very short term, like even for 5 minutes, you say this is helping. And even if afterwards it wasn't, you say it didn't feel better. I mean, I know I've personally been through cycles of that, you know, ate 3 things in a row that I really didn't want, but it felt great. And then I spent 3 hours, you know, just feeling terrible afterward. But it's that moment that's giving us this dopamine and this reward that is like getting into these deep centers, you know, of our emotion, you know? And so when we start getting into a space with food like this, you know, we get into a really deeply personal, emotional sort of space. And that's why I was so interested to hear this term of like metabolic psychiatry and metabolic psychology, you know, because I've thought it like, this is kind of where I am coming from just like the total physical health, and then looking at physical health practices in the body to realize, oh, like there's great healing can come when we actually dive down here and into these emotional spaces because of this mind-body connection. We do emotional work and have real physiologic effects in the body. Yeah.
I was curious about that with your work. Like, how did you come to like just learning the term metabolic psychology? Did that help things fall into place for you with what you were already seeing? Did that add a new perspective of how you work with folks?
Yeah, I think I just appreciated it. It just, there's a certain resonance to the words, you know, where I haven't used that exact terminology before, but it definitely resonates with what I want to be helping people with. You know, what you were saying is like sometimes you shift in the type of eating, you clean things up, and it's like creating space where like, you know, emotions can emerge. And I've seen that so many times for people. I think that is really true in a lot of different ways. You know, I do a lot of dietary counseling like this, help people get processed foods out, choosing the most nutritious foods that come from the earth in a natural way. Very important. I've had a lot of people benefit from a keto sort of approach like that. I will talk with anybody about any range. There's 100 diets that could go all the way toward, you know, more of a plant-based diet if someone feels called to that. Like, have you ever seen any of these kind of flame wars on social media where like vegans and carnivores are just like just at each other?
Yeah.
And I've honestly seen people have positive health benefits from each of these perspectives.
Yeah.
The thing that you couldn't get each of them to agree with, but the thing they have in common is that they're stripping out at least all of the highly processed stuff. Like everybody can agree that these are the worst things.
Yes.
And when we get away from that, like good things can happen in any regard.
Right, exactly. And I think that who was it that calls it Franken foods?
Yeah,
you know, we
I've heard
have to
that.
get away from the Franken foods because when you look at a food label, I kind of joke with folks about if you're reading a food label, you know, you're already
the broccoli doesn't have a food label, you know.
Real food. There's no food label. It's just broccoli, right?
Thing,
yeah. But I believe conceptually in what's called biohacking, that each of us has to hack our own biology.
Yeah.
Because the way that works for me to eat is not going to be the way that it works for you to eat, and the way that it works for me to eat today might not have been what was working for me a year ago. That's one of the things that has been interesting for me is that in my own health journey, I've had to learn to adjust as my body changes, whether it's due to age or hormones or my energy and how much I'm working out. Movement is a huge piece.
Yeah.
So it's not a one size fits all. For any like group of people, a one-size-fits-all is never going to work. But even within an individual, in the long term, we have to learn how to pay attention to our body's signals What is my body telling me when I behave in this way, when I'm doing this habit, as compared to that one, right?
Yeah, this type of thing is one of the things that gets me really excited about the future of medicine and the future of healthcare is moving from this kind of monolithic area of we're all just clones, and like we can just send out an RDA, like every woman needs 1,800 calories and every man needs like 20 whatever 100 calories, and then that's just it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we can be a lot more thoughtful in this space,
right?
And we can open up some space, because I think a lot of health has hardly even given any mind to like paying attention to our body, and just like a broader process of awareness in general. Just such a bedrock of finding an emotional space of peace and contentment and understanding.
Right.
Is so important. And we're just like, why would I pay attention to myself when I could just, go to the doctor? We just kind of outsource responsibility for our own health to somebody else. And I think we're heading toward an era as knowledge tools and other things kind of exploding, where people feeling empowered, hopefully, maybe that's the good side of everything that's happening, feel empowered to like really take action, and dive in to their unique situation.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think for better or for worse, people in feeling empowered, sometimes we go to the wrong sources to find out information. Yeah. But yet, if you have PubMed available to you, which we all do now, if we can do some research into the research that's going on and learn ourselves, we can ask our doctors more questions.
Yeah.
And I love it when people ask me a lot of questions.
Sometimes people come into the office for me and they just apologize. They'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I did some internet searching. I'm like, never apologize for learning things, this is the whole thing. Let's talk about it for sure.
And then you can at least talk and consider the source of where they're getting their information from. There's influencers, and then there's research. And there's research that's paid for by the sugar industry, and there's research so even with a peer-reviewed research, we have to consider all of the influences. And so
much financial interest in medicine and food and everything these days. So the information landscape, even though obviously even as a healthcare provider, it's like it's very difficult. And that's why I think it's so important just to try to also develop our ability of reasoning from first principles and just observing things. And this is what I tell people: you're trying to cultivate awareness in your life. Like, listen, let's just try some things here. And we can run a personal experiment and see if you feel better. Yeah. And it's just amazing when you just say, take the pressure off. We don't have to read all kinds of RCTs about every single thing. We can just say, hey, we've got a spectrum of diets, but out of this whole spectrum of unprocessed things, are there some things that stand out to you that look like you might enjoy eating some of it? Let's just build something around that for a little bit and see if you don't end up feeling better. Yeah. And that's been a pretty good approach.
Yeah. Becoming your own N of one. I tell people you have to be your own N of one. You are the subject, and we have to figure out what works for you.
And then the space, to me, where I take things like, step one, try to dial out, all the processed foods, dial in on healthy nutrition, where you're at along that line. And then I spend time talking to people a lot about opening up some fasting space. And that to me is like, okay, we can fast from carbs is kind of like the first level, and we can actually open up some fasting space more broadly from food in general if we feel called and open to it in a very gentle way. And so I've seen a lot of tremendous health benefits come from people. To me, a fasting space and a healthy eating space, just two sides of the same coin. It's just trying to bring everything into balance. The amount of food and nutrition that is bringing wellness to the body, and then some space if we need it, to open up that space to just let the body digestive system rest and take a break, and then actually have some space to mobilize that stored energy. That's where I try to get people, especially if they're trying to lose weight or burn through blood sugar. So let's just take some space. There's a lot of energy here, and we can open up space. The body knows that it's there. Yeah. The body is saving energy for us for periods if the food runs out, and then we can run off that space. So it's a very fascinating paradox to me. Health can come from eating and from not eating, as long as we're bringing it into a balance, for sure.
I really appreciate that, bringing up I talk about food windows with people.
Yeah.
Probably very similar.
Exactly,
And it's not where we start usually with folks I work with. Sometimes a lot of the people I work with have a history of depriving themselves.
Yeah.
And deprivation can trigger a binge. And so I'm pretty careful about where I start with that. And yet I know the benefits of fasting.
Yeah.
And so when a person is able to get to a point where they're a little bit more food neutral, which is super exciting when someone comes in and they say, I forgot to eat lunch today.
Yeah.
It's a big deal because food noise can be very loud for a lot of us, a lot of folks. And so when that starts to quiet down, it's one of the big draws for GLP-1s. People say, my food noise is gone.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and yay. I have also found that to be true with people when they get the processed food out, when they really reduce their carbohydrates, that the food noise goes away as well. And then they're able to play more with their food windows, which allows the body to do more healing work, right?
Yeah. And I was just the most interested in the thing you said a little while ago, when you're getting the processed food out, cleaning up that diet, and then we were saying, okay, opening up that space where these emotional things come into. And I was just going to add that fasting space is really like the biggest area where I see that with people, because we're totally eliminating all of the other food distractions. And so like we're getting into like a really core space in the body, both with our physiology and with our emotional state, where it's like, like a lot of stuff is going to come up in that space. Like the most obvious one is to say, well, hunger is in that space, but then that's very closely connected with all these other emotions. And maybe are we using food to cover over some other, emotional process, the trauma that's hiding there, and we start really removing that, then I tell people, of course, that's why you want to be very thoughtful and gentle with it. But if you're looking to open up a space where you can really say, I'd be happy to hear your perspective. You say, how do you let go of a trauma? How do you start to process it? Like, you've got to give it some space. And to me, even as a metaphor, as much as physically, just to open up a space is a place where you can really start to let that bubble up a little bit.
Yeah. I think part of it is creating safety. There's physical safety within the body. And I'll talk about that with folks, is that our body will heal when we create safety, when the brain's not wondering if I'm going to have enough fuel for energy, when the body knows I'm getting consistently fueled. That creates physical safety within the body. And I believe the same thing happens emotionally. When you create an emotionally safe place where you can explore some of those memories, some of those hurts, some of those traumas, and doing the physical healing while you're doing the mental healing, it really is about creating safety, to be able to recognize that that's not today.
Yeah.
This is absolutely, it lives within me. There's a wonderful book, The Body Keeps the Score, right?
Yes.
Bessel van der Kolk. And literally, you don't even have to read the book to know.
The title tells you
everything,
yeah,
right?
True.
Literally, we store trauma. And so when we find safety within ourselves and self-trust, which really can come about when we're fueling our body appropriately, then we build that safety. Then we know we can deal with it, and we can let it go, and we can learn to attend to it, is how I talk about it.
Yeah, I feel like, who knows exactly how these things work. Where is it, Is it in here? Is it in here? But in some manner, I think we are expending some amount of our energy to keep the trauma there. And then it is like sending also a message, because it's still there, however that works. We're like recreating it. And as we're holding it, it's like sending the message in there, like things are not safe, And I think, I did a talk a couple months ago on chronic inflammation at the root of chronic disease. And that, a lot of what's happening in chronic inflammation in the body is that like we're always in this fight or flight mode, and so many things in society are pushing us in that direction. Chronic stress and always things are coming, and then we end up shallow breathing. We never take a big deep breath, which is basically the physiologic signal in the body, like that everything is actually okay,
Right.
Take a deep breath, and it's like the breath is giving us an example. There's like a space, like we're opening up space, sending the message that things are okay. All these things are different avenues. We're trying to get to the same place, which is like, how do we get distractions out of the way? How do we tell the body that things are okay? Open up space so that we can finally stop running these processes. You say, how do you get chronic inflammation down? How do you get these things out so that the body can get to this grounded sort of place? And so we're kind of talking through all the processes that I know, which is like choosing the healthiest foods,
Right.
trying to develop the healthiest mindset and mental space, open up even some fasting space if you're called through it, just burn through every sort of dysfunctional thing and get down to the core issues. This is what I really want our health system to be focused on, right?
Yeah.
Powerful core health and healing. And, over the last decade or so, since I've really been trying to dial in with it, I've seen a lot of that, people who were having diseases like type 2 diabetes and autoimmune diseases like bowel disorders, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease, and so many things, who are not suffering from these things anymore. And, someone in the medical system say, medical system very hesitant ever to use the word healing as like too big or powerful, but we say, oh, they're in remission. And I say, if you want to say they're in remission and you want to say they still have the disease, but they're diet controlled or whatever, whatever, I just want people to be experiencing wellness, however they can do it.
Yeah, that in the world of mental health, the idea of a cure is very a heated discussion, like literally right now, because some words have been thrown out there about curing schizophrenia. And the research has shown with a ketogenic approach, a way of eating, that schizophrenia can be put into remission, like psychosis. There's case studies, quite a few now, they're starting to build up. It's not just about dealing with basic anxiety and depression, which for someone suffering with anxiety or depression, there's nothing basic about it. It's serious and impacts your whole world.
No doubt.
But serious mental illness can be mitigated. I don't know about the word cure. I kind of, sometimes I sort of feel like, well, if someone is able to go off medications and do well, is that a cure?
Yeah.
Do we need to argue about that? I talk about quality of life, if your quality of life, because I've worked with people, I am not anti-medication. Mm-hmm. Medication saves lives every day. Yeah. And I don't fool myself about that. I am pro-choice, really, when it comes to understanding what are my options? What if the side effects are intolerable to me? I'd like to look at it, they're effects. They're not side effects, they're one of the effects, right? Yeah. And so if they're working for me, then yay. And what if they're not? Then what are my options? Yeah. What are the choices that I have? Because there are choices. We need to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, try to get as many of the fundamentals in place as possible. So we're all doing all these things that are pretty much free. We're going to be eating something. Why not put that money into the healthiest foods? Like it can only help.
Right.
Like, you know, I'm a big believer in first do no harm. Yeah. And, nobody going to be harmed by switching their diet into some unprocessed foods, Right. And so like I say, why not give it a try? And then we see where we go from there. And then we can, layer everything else
absolutely.
on top of it.
Absolutely. So,
what is on your radar in the days to come? What are you working on these days?
Well, I'm really excited about an upcoming documentary that I'm sponsoring here at in Fitchburg, coming up in April, and it's called The Cholesterol Code, and that is about metabolic health, and I'm very excited about that. I'm doing a lot of work one-on-one with folks about just trying to get the word out about really getting metabolically healthy and all of the different things that you can address. A lot of it is that the things that we'll do for a long time, if you're eating in a certain way that's not ideal, you can get away with that for a long time. But round about midlife, all of those things, it builds up and it builds up and the body starts pushing back. So I really work with folks who are around midlife usually. Not always. I have a fair number of young folks that I work with that are trying to be proactive with their health.
Excellent.
But yes, I know, it's so exciting. And so working with people in midlife who are recognizing, what I was doing all these years is not working any longer. So that's really what I'm focusing on right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you told me a little about this documentary. It looks so good. Really excited about it. I'm going to put links in the description to learn more about this movie. And if it's all right, I'll put a link to your website if people want to connect with you on it. Really appreciate this discussion. Really nice to connect and chat about health and wellness. Thank you all for joining us here. Throw questions for Michelle and myself in the comments. We'll be happy to have an ongoing discussion about any of these topics. And if there are questions, maybe we can do this again in the future.
I would
Respond
love that. This
to any questions, perspectives that you have. Look forward to carrying on the conversation.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.